There was this really interesting thing that happened a few years ago where there was this new regulation that changed how employers can look at health insurance. And the way that they do it now, I mean, I came into the world of health insurance being somebody who kind of lived in the home and auto world. So I didn't know much about it, probably like a lot of folks that are listening. But the way that it was done seems so weird to me. It's like right now, my employer picks a plan for me, even though they have no idea what my health needs are. They go out and they pick a plan, maybe 2 or 3 plans that are supposed to fit. One of them are supposed to fit me, right?
Welcome to Business Ninjas, brought to you by WriteForMe, where you'll hear from business leaders who are out there growing their business and slaying it every day. Learn from the masters. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of Business Ninjas. I'm here today with Jason Pappas. He's the Northeast Regional Sales Director at SureCo. Jason, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kelsey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to have you. So Jason, why don't you start and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm based out of Buffalo, New York, lifelong Bills fan for better or worse, and have been in this world of insurance, which sounds really, really boring, but I promise it's interesting. I've been in this world of insurance for the past 15 years and have kind of moved through different spaces in the insurance world, but have always kind of focused in on this insurance innovation. And again, I know insurance sounds really boring, but when you think about insurance, don't just think about the boring piece of it. Think about it as protecting the things that you value. Because when you need insurance, you tend to, hopefully really like it, or at least really like that it's there. But I've been sitting in this insurance innovation space throughout the course of my career and have moved through kind of home and auto insurance, owned a digitally based insurance business for a little while, did some consulting with insurance carriers, and more recently have stepped into this world of health insurance. And the transition into this space has been fascinating. I've learned a ton about how we look at our health, how our employers look at our health, however odd that may seem, and have recently been a part of launching this brand new health insurance product throughout the country that really puts the power back in the hands of consumers in a really huge way. We can talk a bunch more about that and kind of how I got into that space, but that's a little bit about me and where I am. And also on a more personal note, I'm married and have way too many children. We're at 4 now, which seems way above the norm. And I totally understand why.
Oh, that's funny. Well, kind of personally, I appreciate you sharing kind of, go Bills while we're at it. And also too, a little bit about your personal life. And I can certainly hear the passion kind of behind your, not only your personal life, but also, your professional kind of career thus far and your interests. So I appreciate that background. So tell me kind of, as we start to dive into SureCo a little bit, tell me a little bit about SureCo and what SureCo does.
Yeah, certainly. So, there was this really interesting thing that happened a few years ago where there was this new regulation that changed how employers can look at health insurance. And the way that they do it now, I mean, I came into the world of health insurance being somebody who kind of lived in the home and auto world. So I didn't know much about it, probably like a lot of folks that are listening. But the way that it was done seems so weird to me. It's like right now, my employer picks a plan for me, even though they have no idea what my health needs are. They go out and they pick a plan, maybe 2 or 3 plans that are supposed to fit. One of them are supposed to fit me, right? And they try and do that on behalf of, hundreds or thousands of employees. And this new thing came about where instead of doing it that way, employers could just give employees money that was earmarked for health insurance, and the employees could go out and pick the plan that best fit them. So it's this really interesting kind of model change in the world of health insurance, where instead of just trying to pick one group plan that fits every one of your employees, you're just giving your employees money and letting them pick the thing that fits their unique health needs and their specific geography, because health insurance is incredibly regionalized as you move throughout the country. And even within each state, there's a lot of regionalization of health insurance. So it's this new way of doing health insurance. It's called the individual coverage HRA that flips the current model on its head and actually does something that makes a lot more sense. Like, this is how we treat everything else in our financial relationship with our employees. We give them money and they go buy the things that they need, right? We give them money, they go buy a home, they go buy a car, they go buy home insurance, they go buy auto insurance. Health insurance is still the only thing stuck in that old way, but it's stuck in that old way in a very personal side of our lives. Like, we would all agree that our health choices are personal choices. So why is it that our employer is making the decision on how we protect our personal health? Whereas, with this new model of doing things, the employers just give the employees money and the employees make their own decisions, kind of like they do with everything else. But you asked about SureCo. So that's what SureCo does. SureCo administers these things called individual coverage HRAs. We facilitate these things where the employer gives the employees money in this specific vehicle that's a tax-free vehicle, and the employees then use that money to go purchase their own health insurance. Now, of course, the SureCo team guides the employees through their purchasing decisions and also guides them through the life cycle of their policy. And we also take care of, pulling out their portion of the premium direct from their paycheck, just like what happened before, and paying the carriers directly, just like what happened before. So we create a seamless experience within this new benefits model.
Interesting. So it sounds like there has to be a large impact on not only the employees, but also the employers with this model.
Yeah. For employers, this thing gets a lot simpler because, right now, every year as an employer, if you're doing this, you feel this when I'm talking about it. You don't just hear it. But every year as an employer, it's getting up to renewal time. You've already had preparatory meetings with your broker where your broker's telling you, hey, it's going to be 10, 20% increase this year. And then you have to decide, well, hey, am I going to water down the offering I'm making to my employees and make them pay more out of pocket for their health costs, make them pay more out of pocket for their insurance costs? Or am I going to eat the whole expense as a business owner? So for employers, there's a lot of administrative work that goes with it. And then there's this annual rate increase that's just a headache for business owners every year. With this new model, the SureCo individual coverage HRA, it's a lot simpler. They're just giving the employees money and the employees are buying the things that they need. And every year, just like they do with their compensation, the employers can make a decision around, well, do I want to give the employees more money? But they're not going out and reshopping plans every year, having their broker go out to the market and get quotes from all these different carriers every year. Their broker's coming to them and saying, hey, this is where the individual market's headed from a potential increase or decrease perspective. So maybe this impacts how much money you're giving your people, just like with everything else. Hey, cost of living is going up by X. We're giving you a salary increase of Y. So this whole thing just starts to align everything else for employers with how they currently treat their employees.
Mm-hmm. And I think you raised a really great point, in kind of that talk track that you were doing, talking about, the importance of using this model because, post-COVID, the distributed workforce, like you said, you may have employees in California, New York, the Carolinas, all over the place. So being able to provide that choice to say, this is what fits me best is so important.
Yeah. And for those employers out there who, they're in that spot where maybe pre-COVID, they were all in the same spot, but then COVID hit and kind of scattered everybody throughout the country. And now they have this distributed workforce. Well, if you're sitting in that spot, finding one health plan to fit, and it's already hard enough to find one health plan to fit the unique health needs of all of your employees. It's even harder to fit the unique geographies of all your employees because you got to have doctors in network for all those employees. And then what people typically end up doing is they will buy a plan that just, has like all the doctors that they can get into the network. But the thing is, you pay for that. And you don't just pay for that, your employees pay for that. Mm-hmm. So instead, you can give the employees the money and the employees can go out and get plans in their geography that best fit their needs and have their doctors in network. Like, I'm a decent example of this. SureCo is based in California. We have an office in California, office in Texas. I'm based in Buffalo, New York. So in California, maybe Kaiser is kind of the gold standard around there. But in Buffalo, I really like independent health. A Kaiser plan would not work for me. And I also don't want to pay for a national network of doctors. When I go to the doctor, I go in Buffalo and I've got 3 docs that I see. So I don't want to pay for 100 doctors if I only need 3. So for me, from a geographical perspective, this thing works really. And, we've onboarded a number of companies that have those geographically distributed workforces. And one of the things that they come to us and tell us is, yeah, this thing, of course, it fits us a lot better than it did before, but it's also just so much easier to administer for a national workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, talking about COVID and, having a distributed workforce now, I'm curious, are there other ways that COVID kind of impact the insurance and healthcare industry from your opinion with SureCo?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, we're still seeing some of the impacts of it, but it certainly drove up costs in a really big way. And when you're driving up costs, it's just making employers take another look at what they're doing overall. And the individual coverage HRA could be an avenue for cost savings too. For a lot of the employers that we work with, it is. Like the rates on their health insurance plan now are skyrocketing because people are finally getting all those elective things that they put off during COVID. So they're seeing their costs rise. And right now, for most employers, if you're over 100, let's just use that as a kind of a benchmark. Really, it starts at over 50 in a lot of states. But if you're over 100 employees, your rates are based, at least in some portion, on the health of your employees, on the claims of your employees. So if your employees are going out and accruing a lot more claims, like they're going to the doctor more, they're getting these elective surgeries more, whatever it might be, your rates could be going through the roof because your rates are based on the health of your employees. So every organization faces a financial risk that is tied to the health of its employees with the current model. With the individual coverage HRA, all the plans are just community rated. None of the rates are based on pre-existing health conditions. Your rates as an employer, or those individual rates are not going to change at all based on your health or the health of your employee population. They're all community-based rates. So you get to spread your risk out over a larger group of people. But overall, one of the other things that COVID has changed, to more directly answer your question, is just the price of health insurance, and the individual coverage HRA is a way to drive that price down.
I'm curious, using this individual coverage HRA model, is that one of the ways that SureCo is really able to differentiate itself from, other companies that are similar to SureCo?
Oh gosh, yes, and we differentiate ourselves in the health insurance space with this ICHRA product. I mean, this is our core focus as a company. And I'm sorry, I'm starting to say ICHRA. I feel like we're good enough friends now where I've said individual coverage HRA enough. I can shorten the acronym a little bit for us.
Yeah.
So we'll call it ICHRA from here on out. You don't have to say God bless you every time I say it. We'll call it an ICHRA from here on out. So the ICHRA is our core focus as a company, but there are a couple other companies out there administering ICHRAs. Now, the thing that tends to separate us from a lot of other ICHRA administrators is, one, we've built our product for larger employers, kind of that 100+ market for employers, like employers with 100+ eligible employees. And we've created a product that mirrors the group experience. So we have pre-tax payroll deductions. We tend to fully integrate with the employer's payroll system, and we're making the payments directly to the carriers on behalf of each individual. Now, it sounds simple, but if I said it was easy, people on my operations team would be messaging me afterwards. It's an incredibly complex thing to actually make happen, but SureCo has a good chunk of experience in this space. So there's two things I would point to here. I mean, one, we started out as an individual and family plan agency, so we have a lot of experience guiding individuals through their health insurance choices on an individual basis. But two, some of the executives within SureCo kind of saw this thing come. They saw that employers should really be able to just give their people money and let them buy individual policies. And we knew that those individual policies had a lot of strength to them because we've been selling them throughout the country for years. And they actually started lobbying for the ICHRA legislation in Washington years before it came about. So we had a head start in a pretty big way from a technology and process development standpoint. That's another thing that tends to really set us apart from the rest of the ICHRA market. And overall, just the experience we're creating for employers and employees. Because we had that head start, because we create that experience that feels just like their group experience today, we've got a number of testimonials from happy employers, happy employees. But yeah, those are a couple things that tend to set us apart from the rest of the market.
That's fantastic. And Jason, I think that's, an interesting note that, what really differentiates SureCo from its competition. I think that's fantastic. I appreciate you kind of expanding on that, talking about, the ICHRA administration. So I'm curious to pick your brain a little bit, kind of in a similar but different direction, talking about common misconceptions, because it sounds like people may not fully understand the benefits of this model. So I'm curious, maybe I'm wrong in that, but I'm curious kind of here, are there any misconceptions that you tend to hear often, whether it be from employees, employers?
Yeah, those are a couple really interesting angles to take with it. I'll approach both of them separately. So let's look at it from the employee standpoint first, because, in full transparency, every time we've brought this into an organization, just about every time, there's this thing that happens within the employee base. There's a lot of skepticism. I would love to say, hey, we roll this out and all the employees are just overjoyed. They can't wait for this change in their health insurance. But I think we all know that that's not true. The employees start out with a healthy dose of skepticism. And I've done this with thousands of employees at this point. And, I've done this in nursing homes. I've done this with truckers, with manufacturers. And I'll pick on my truckers just a little bit. They had some of the most colorful skepticism. And it was well placed, because in the past, when have we heard that there was going to be a change in our health insurance and it was ever good news, right? So anyways, the thing that I did is I would go and I would sit alongside some of our enrollment team as they guided these employees through their health insurance decision. I would talk to the employees before they came into that meeting, and I would talk to them on the other side of it. So before they came in, healthy skepticism, a little bit colorful sometimes. They go into that meeting and they're having some of these personal conversations, or a lot of them are even just going through our platform, making the decision. And, they're starting to find plans that have unique fits for their doctors, their prescription drugs, their financial considerations, all of these different aspects of their health life. And on the other side of these meetings, I was talking to them again, and their countenance was completely changed. So on the other side of these meetings, the employees are coming out saying, yeah, this thing's incredible. I finally understand my health insurance, or I finally have a policy that fits me and my family. But just to make sure that I wasn't just like hearing things that I want to hear, I don't know about you all. I'm prone to that. I like to hear things I want to hear. Just to make sure that wasn't the case, I surveyed everybody a couple weeks after open enrollment, and the results that we got back were phenomenal. So the one question that I'll point to, just for the sake of time, is, give me a post-enrollment satisfaction score for your new health plan. And we got an average 8.5 to 9.5 out of 10, which in the health insurance world is unheard of. Average scores are kind of 3-4 out of 10. So we found that employees ended up loving this thing, but on the front end, very skeptical. Now, let me address the other side of this thing. Some common misconceptions. So the misconception from the employee is this thing's going to be bad for me. Misconception from the employer is, one, that employees are going to hate it, which, I think we talked about enough. Because initially they might, but on the other side of it, they're going to love this thing. And this is going to be their permanent benefit solution moving forward. They're never going the other way with this thing. At SureCo, we have 100% client retention for a reason. Like, nobody's ever going back the other way after they go with this model. But let me focus in on your question. So, other misconceptions. One misconception is that the individual market is not strong, like that the plans on the individual market are not good plans. And, unfortunately, that's something that the idea of that may have been slightly true back when the ACA marketplace really started coming about, call it 2013, 2020 to 2015. Since then, the plans on the individual marketplace have gotten incredibly strong, and there are certain pockets throughout the country where it's stronger than others. But really, wherever we go throughout the country, we're finding good quality plans with strong carriers who are providing a really good employee experience. Mm-hmm. And they're providing plans that accomplish different things for different employees. There's some with narrow doctors networks. There's some with really broad doctors networks. So those are a couple things that come about. Also from the employer, there's always some skepticism just around change. And we know how that goes, right? Like, if you live in the tech world, you're constantly promoting change, right? But not everybody wants to embrace change. So that tends to be one of the bigger hurdles with when I'm out talking to people about this thing. Like, it's just so different. where it's just such a big change, even though it totally makes sense, right? It could make sense financially, it could make sense logically, but it's still such a big shift. So that tends to be another hurdle for employers.
I think it's really interesting. I want to circle back to something you said during that I don't think that I fully heard correctly at the beginning of this call, because it sounds like, one, you've got the individual, HRA that you're rolling out, but you mentioned having your enrollment team actually walk employees through. So not only are you just giving this to the employers, but you're really giving that white glove service to give a full rollout to make sure you get the buy-in and so on.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I think you kind of have to. It would almost be mean to just throw a pile of cash at an employee and say, hey, here's 50 options, have fun. So no, we do take a very white glove approach to this thing. We built out a really simple, intuitive platform that employees can go through and they can make their decisions through that platform. We've also got a call center team that's available. We've got email support that's available, chat support available. We'll schedule one-on-one meetings with employees. There's a number of different ways that we guide the employees through their purchasing process, especially the first year that they're implementing this new benefit model.
That's terrific. Well, Jason, I think this has been an amazing conversation. If people want to learn more about SureCo, where can they go?
Yeah, that's a great question. Head right to SureCo.com. We've got a ton of great information there. And also, I'm happy to have a conversation with anybody who wants to talk about this. You may have already picked up on this. I'm a nerd for this whole thing. I really do think it's revolutionizing enterprise health benefits. And I think this is going to have a huge impact. It already is throughout the country. But feel free to get a hold of me too. My email is jpappas@sureco.com.
Terrific, Jason. Well, as we start to wrap up this conversation, is there anything that you want to leave our listeners with, whether it be advice, anything, about, an individual HRA, anything like that? Anything you want to leave our listeners with?
The one thing I would leave them with is just to think critically about how their health benefits are done now. Why do you do it the way you do versus this other way that's available to you? There's a lot of good reasons to start thinking about utilizing a different approach to your group health benefits. And we're happy to talk you through that. We're happy to work with your broker as you work through that process. So that's one thing I would leave with. But I also just want to say thank you so much for having me today. This conversation has been a lot of fun, and really enjoyed getting to meet all the listeners here. Thanks so much.
Yeah, it was great to have you, Jason. I appreciate you being on Business Ninjas today.
Thanks so much.